Mist moved in across the mountain as an eagle soared in the sky, an omen of victory for the Lord's people over a tremendous evil. Today would mark the end of a horrific war. Axel stood, looking out on the valley before him. He was prepared to die on this bloody day, fighting for his land, his people, and his Savior. In faith, he bowed, closed his eyes, and began to pray. He thought on his wife, his children, and his sweet home, the gifts that God gave him and how he had been blessed, praying to the Lord, who sits atop his white throne, that he would keep him quick and not bring him to rest. Axel had trained for years for this final battle, to save his people from the end of their culture, ensuring all they'd worked for wouldn't unravel. Here his enemies would be eaten by vultures. Axel's men were outnumbered, but they didn't fear the enemy that encroached on their holy lands, for they were prideful and hadn't taken the care to understand the territory and its demands. They were weighed down by unnecessary armor, slowed by their horrific accoutrements of war. Ironically, it would only take an archer and his arrow to send them reeling in an uproar. And once in disarray, they'd be easy fodder, righteously cut down in the name of the true Lord. They'd scream as Axel's warriors led them to slaughter. That, or they would bend their knee and lay down their swords. This invading army fought under Culminating, seeking to raid and plunder the northern peoples. They'd enslaved and raped weaker tribes without a fuss, disregarding the consequence of their evils. Those who resisted them were made an example. Their children were disemboweled, alive, as they watched. The women were flayed, their skins, with horses, trampled, and then the men, castrated, while their heads were crushed. The remains of any who resisted were burnt until naught of their corpses remained, while the smoke rose high into the sky, a message to convert. One would have been a fool to think they were a joke. Axel was no fool and understood the danger of underestimating the enemy's strength. He wouldn't forgo his people like a traitor, and to protect them from harm would go to great lengths. He wouldn't let his wife and children be murdered, nor would he let his country become the final example to the northern people to further the aims of Culminating, the North's greatest rival. Culminating came from the imperial powers in the south, who enslaved their people to profit off of their labor till their souls were devoured, feigning any goodness and yoking the honest. Off of the backs of their slaves, they constructed huge edifices to their glory and their conquest, ignoring the effects of their vicious abuse and all of the evils that it did manifest. 'Twas Soliunin, the land of blood and slavery, built upon the skulls of the people they'd destroyed, a land of hedonism and debauchery where no one truly thought, for their souls were devoid. Axel would not let his nation become their tool. He readied his men, raised his sword, and praised the Lord, that Soliunin would learn that the North is ruled by God and would bring upon Soliunin discord. Axel blew the ritual horn. The warriors descended upon Culminating and all his men with ferocity and immensely glorious strength, so to hell the Soliunin would be sent. The northern men dismembered the Soliunin until their blood soaked the dirt and their screams silenced the birds. There was nowhere for them to run. Axel's blade would upend Culminating, the tyrant. Amongst the great clamor, Axel found that vile being, and with his blade cut off that wretch's ugly head. The northern men laughed as the Soliunin screamed. They would not stop till every one of them were dead. When the battle ceased, no Soliunin were left. All of them had been slaughtered by the northern men. Culminating and his men were no longer a pest, and Soliunin from its legion had become rent. The Soliunin had become carrion for vultures. Their bones were to be picked clean and eaten. The northern men had brutally finished this war, leaving the proud Soliunin broken and beaten. Their blood ran into the rivers and turned it red, while their flesh rotted and stench stunk up the forest. Sacraments and prayers were given to Axel's dead, asking the Lord to let their souls peacefully rest. Axel bowed before the Lord once more to be blessed, for if it wasn't for him, the North would have died. His love for the Lord he had utterly professed. Axel's belief in God allowed him to survive. The Soliunin had been excised from the north, and it was now liberated from this point forth.